Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Christian, and welcome to CatechesisCraft, where we talk Christianity and play Minecraft. Here at CatechesisCraft, while I will be very clear and open about my faith and personal beliefs when the topic requires it, the goal of this channel is not to make any of you wonderful viewers out there believe exactly what I believe for fear of damnation. Rather, I wish to present as clear, concise, and objective an answer to the many great and small questions about Christianity as I can. This series is designed as a teaching tool, with the goal in mind of being applicable to all audiences regardless of how much, how little, or what fashion of faith the viewer might have. So today, I invite you to join me in learning about who Jesus Christ is, as we examine secular records, religious beliefs, and the claims Jesus made about himself. So first and foremost, what can we prove without a shadow of a doubt about the person of Jesus of Nazareth? Can we even really prove that he existed? What's important is if there were no believers with true faith, if there were no Christians that survived past the first century, if there were never any apostolic records through the ages going back almost 2,000 years, we could still be certain about these few things regarding the life of Jesus. Number one, we know Jesus was a Jewish man from the Roman province of Judea in the 1st century AD. Number two, we know Jesus at the very least claimed to be the Messiah. And three, we know he was executed by crucifixion during the reign of Emperor Tiberius by the order of Pontius Pilate, the prefect and procurator of the Roman province of Judea during the early to mid-1st century. These three things, as plain as they may seem, are often believed to be rumors, hearsay, or simply taken for granted. It's a very popular position today in secular and certain theologically diluted religious circles that Jesus of Nazareth was not in fact a real person. Rather, the position holds that Jesus was either an idea, which is to say a character arc that is representative of the hero's journey, or that Jesus was a stand-in and invention of the apostles to promote some kind of Jewish uprising against Rome during the 1st century. To the larger academic community, neither of these fictitious Jesus positions really hold up to any level of scrutiny deeper than the surface. However, they are very easy ways of dismissing religious talking points and presenting the opposition in a debate or discussion as being some kind of fanatic. These 3 points about the historical figure of Jesus can be proven by two of the most important historians of the early Roman Empire, Tacitus and Flavius Josephus. Tacitus was a late 1st century and early 2nd century Roman senator and historian who wrote extensively about the early years of the Roman Empire, focusing specifically on the Julio-Claudian dynasty from the time of Tiberius to the time of Nero. His final and most comprehensive work, titled Annals, which was completed around 114 AD, records early Christians and Christ in the following passage of Book 15, Chapter 44, quote, "But all human efforts, all the lavish gifts of the emperor, and the propitiations of the gods did not banish the sinister belief that the conflagration was the result of an order. Consequently, to get rid of the report, Nero fastened the guilt and inflicted the most exquisite tortures on a class hated for their abominations called Christians by the populace. Christus, from whom the name has its origin, suffered the extreme penalty during the reign of Tiberius at the hands of one of our procurators, Pontius Pilatus, and a most mischievous superstition, thus checked for the moment, again broke out not only in Judea, the first source of the evil, but even in Rome, where all things hideous and shameful from every part of the world find their center and become popular. According to an arrest which first made all who pleaded guilty, then upon their information an immense multitude was convicted, not so much of the crime of firing the city as of hatred against mankind." The importance of Tacitus as a source simply cannot be understated. A Roman senator, one of the most powerful positions in the empire, and an individual who had no personal, cultural, or social connection to the story of Christ, is able to say without a shadow of a doubt that he did in fact exist and was crucified, which is referred to in this translation as suffering the extreme penalty, by procurator Pontius Pilatus, and that he inspired a, quote, most mischievous superstition, in his apostles and later Christians across the empire to believe that he was resurrected and is in fact the embodiment and son of the one true God. Furthermore, Tacitus does not refer to Jesus of Nazareth by Jesus or Jesus Nazaren, both of which were written on Jesus' plaque during his crucifixion, but rather as Christus, which is itself a derivation from the Hebrew term Mashiach, which in English is pronounced Messiah. The evolution of this term has been recorded in the Septuagint. This text was the early Hebrew to Greek translation of the Jewish scriptures, known broadly by Christians as the Old Testament of the Bible, originally translated sometime during the period of Greek rule in the region of Judea. Now, why it would have been translated from Hebrew to Greek is that Greek had quickly become and would remain for a very long time the most common language across the Mediterranean. Now, it matters that Tacitus records Christus rather than simply Jesus of Nazareth in its various forms, as it provides concrete evidence that Christianity's origins go back as far as the early middle of the 1st century, and that they must have believed that Jesus was the Messiah, not merely some great teacher, philosopher, or orator who promoted universal values and self-evident truths about reality, but genuinely a savior. Otherwise, Christus would not have become the most common name to call Jesus by. His recording of Pontius Pilatus as procurator, which means governor, of the Judean province during Tiberius's reign, reinforces the position held by the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John as a historical belief, and Jesus' execution by crucifixion as a matter of historical fact. One of the most helpful facts of the Roman structure of governance was the sheer amount of bureaucracy involved in each and every matter of Roman law, especially recording decisions made by the appointed leaders of each province across the empire. Regardless of whether Pilate wanted to tell his superiors in Rome about Jesus, he would have been legally required to record the proceedings and determinations of Jesus' trial, therefore providing evidence that Tacitus would later record in annals. Now, if this is what a Roman can tell us about Jesus, what can his own people, the Jewish people, say about him? Joseph ben Matthias was born into the elite society of Jerusalem. The son of Matthias, one of the priests of the Holy Temple and royal descendant through his mother's line of the former Hasmonean dynasty during the Greek reign of Judea, Joseph had originally fought in the First Jewish-Roman War against his Roman authorities before being captured and enslaved by Vespasian rather than executed. As Josephus told Vespasian, he interpreted the messianic prophecies of the Old Testament to speak about Vespasian's rise to emperor. This First Jewish-Roman War would end around 67 AD. After Vespasian became emperor, he granted Josephus his freedom, who took the emperor's family name, becoming Flavius Josephus, and being granted Roman citizenship and becoming a close friend and advisor to Vespasian's son and future emperor, Titus. The most complete collection of Josephus's works are recorded in his two major texts, The Jewish Wars, which was completed around AD 75, and Antiquities of the Jews, which was completed around AD 94. These texts are some of the most important historical artifacts of the 1st century as evidence and description of Jewish life, beliefs, and society during the 1st century. Now, regarding Jesus, Josephus records the following, quote, "Now there was about this time Jesus, a wise man, if it be lawful to call him a man, for he was a doer of wonderful works, a teacher of such men as received the truth with pleasure. He drew over to him both many of the Jews and many of the Gentiles. He was believed to be the Christ. And when Pilate, at the suggestion of the principal men among us, had condemned him to the cross, those that loved him at the first did not forsake him, for he appeared to them alive again the 3rd day, as the divine prophets had foretold, these and 10,000 other wonderful things concerning him. And the tribe of Christians, so named from him, are not extinct to this day." This text is an astounding claim about Jesus' nature, life, and legacy, and is recorded by a non-Christian and a former member of the Jewish elite. Josephus had every reason to not believe the stories about Jesus and testimonies of the apostles, and even then, Josephus could not deny the many works, deeds, and the amazing life Jesus had led as a teacher, healer, and miracle worker, as well as the widespread belief and first-hand testimonies of many of those who saw him in the period following his resurrection. Now, as opposed to Tacitus, whose writings we have manuscript copy fragments of going back to the early 2nd century, shortly after they were completed, the earliest manuscripts we have of Josephus are from the 6th century, which would be around the 500s AD, but various manuscripts across various languages and communities with little to no contact all record the same writings with minor linguistic and perspective shifts that read best to their audience. For instance, a 10th century Slavonic copy, written in a precursor language to modern Slavic tongues like Russian, Ukrainian, and others, this copy records, quote, "he was Christ," rather than, quote, "he was believed to be Christ," which likely reflects the largely Christian audience it was written for and transcribed by in the monastic tradition. Even so, the text provides invaluable historical evidence for the Christian traditions and beliefs as spanning back to merely decades after the original events, from an author alive during the lives of many of the apostles, including Paul, Peter, and John of Patmos, who was the last to pass away, and the only one we can confirm died of natural causes. Of course, if we were asking about who Jesus is, it's probably a smart idea to ask the man himself. So, who did Jesus claim to be? The life of Jesus is recorded in 4 major texts, the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. In a future video, we'll go over each of the Gospels and their historical veracities as text, but for today, let's just focus on what Christ claims inside of these books. Throughout the 4 Gospels, we see Jesus claim the right to miraculously heal pains, sufferings, and sicknesses of the world, doing so at the very least 26 individually recorded times, with multiple examples across authors of Jesus healing nondescript large crowds and groups of people at a time for their ailments and forgiving their sins. Now, even these cannot be a full accounting, as the Gospel of John ends with, "Now there were also many other things that Jesus did. Were every one of them to be written, I suppose that the world itself could not contain the books that would be written." When discussing specific titles and specific names that Jesus claimed, one of the important ones is Jesus claimed the title of Lord of the Sabbath, which was a very scandalous thing to do and was considered blasphemous to the priests and teachers of the law, as only God was Lord of the Sabbath, and he created and commanded his people to live by it. Jesus claiming power over what God created is placing himself equal to God. Quote, "At that time, Jesus went through the grain fields on the Sabbath. His disciples were hungry, and they began to pluck heads of grain and to eat. But when the Pharisees saw it, they said to him, 'Look, your disciples are doing what is not lawful to do on the Sabbath.' And he said to them, 'Have you not read what David did when he was hungry? And those who were with him, how they entered the house of God and ate the bread of the presence, which was not lawful for them to eat, nor for those who were with him, but only for the priests? Or have you not read in the law how on the Sabbath the priests in the temple profane the Sabbath and are guiltless? I tell you, something greater than the temple is here, and if you had known what this means, 'I desire mercy, not sacrifice,' you would not have condemned the guiltless, for the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath." Of course, one of the most common things for Jesus to have claimed was to claim to be the Messiah, the prophesied King of the Jews, descended of the line of David, who would overcome the world and establish an eternal kingdom over all the earth. This might have been one of the least scandalous claims he really could have made. Across the 1st century, many individuals claimed to be the Messiah. The most common understanding of the Messiah during the 1st century was almost entirely as a militaristic and political figure in nature. The leaders of the Jewish communities were expecting not a Nazarene, one of the poorest Jewish communities, nor were they expecting a carpenter and craftsman, nor a humble servant at heart, but a conquering military king, someone who would crush Rome under his heel and proclaim his glory over all the earth. A political figure who would reestablish the Davidic dynasty and run out all the Gentiles and non-believers from the kingdom of Israel. Quote, "Jesus said to her, 'Woman, believe me, the hour is coming when neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem will you worship the Father. You worship what you do not know. We worship what we know, for salvation is from the Jews. But the hour is coming and is now here when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and truth, for the Father is seeking such people to worship him. God is spirit, and those who worship him must worship in spirit and truth.' And this woman said to him, 'I know that Messiah is coming, he who is called Christ. When he comes, he will tell us all these things." And Jesus said to her, "I who speak to you am he." But most importantly, the greatest offense Jesus committed against the priests and the teachers, the leaders of the Jewish community, Jesus claimed to be the Son of Man. Over the course of the Gospels, Jesus claims to be the Son of Man 90 different times. But what does the title specifically mean? On the surface, Son of Man seems very simply like a way of saying human male, which makes sense. After all, every man is a son of another man, going back as far as humans have been on this earth. But the scriptural significance of the term, the Son of Man, is in its relation to God. The Son of Man is placed at God's right hand, the closest person to the Creator of all things as possible. For Jesus, a human, to claim to be the Son of Man is not only claiming to be the Messiah, a military and political figure, not merely a prophet who has been empowered to heal the sicknesses and sufferings of the world like so many past, not only Lord of the Sabbath, which would be blasphemous and worthy of rebuke and expulsion from the Jewish society on its own, but the Son of Man is claiming to be the child of God himself. But Jesus remained silent, and the high priests said to him, "I adjure you by the living God, tell us who you are. Tell us if you are the Christ, the Son of God." Jesus said to him, "You have said so, but I tell you, from now on you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of power and coming on the clouds of heaven." Then the high priest tore his robes and said, "He has uttered blasphemy. What further witnesses do we need? You have now heard his blasphemy. What is your judgment?" And the crowd answered, "He deserves death." The most important human, the perfect Adam, the child of the new Eve, salvation itself, the Word of God made flesh, worthy of all honor, all glory, and all praise across the world. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him, and without him not anything was made that was made. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. For many of these titles, but most importantly, Son of Man, Jesus was crucified. Had he not claimed these titles, or had he renounced what the teachers and priests believed to be blasphemy, he would have not only saved himself from death, but from the most painful death imaginable in the Roman world, a death so torturous that the word excruciating was invented to describe it. Because Jesus believed himself to be God made flesh, Jesus had to be put to death. Now, Jesus claimed these many and great titles, without which he would have been a historical footnote, but what did his own students, his apostles, believe about him? The Gospels are the recorded events of Jesus' life through the eyes of the apostles and written down by a mixture of apostles and early Christians recording these apostles' testimonies. The apostles Matthew and John are attributed as authors of two of these texts, with the Gospel of Matthew historically being completed around AD 55 to 65, and the Gospel of John being completed sometime during his exile to the island of Patmos, around AD 80 to 90. However, multiple references to the Temple of Jerusalem as being a place that still exists throughout all four of these texts indicate that a majority of the texts, if not all of them, were written before the end of the First Jewish-Roman War in AD 70. Now, the Gospels of Mark and Luke are two very different cases, neither of them being eyewitnesses to much, if any, of the works of Jesus. Mark is believed to have been John Mark, the scribe and assistant to Peter in his later years, as a significant amount of the details about Peter's life are recorded in relation to Jesus' ministry. Now, the Gospel of Luke is the most unique of the four Gospels, with nearly 60% of the events only being recorded in this Gospel. From Luke, we are given the births of John the Baptist and Jesus, the only biblical material on Jesus' childhood, and iconic stories like the Good Samaritan, the resurrection of Lazarus, and the ascension into heaven. Luke also records details that would only be available to those who were directly involved in the event. For instance, this passage taking place just after the shepherds were visited by the angels to announce Christ's birth and having met Christ. Quote, And all who heard it wondered at what the shepherds told them, but Mary treasured up all these things, pondering them in her heart. The inner thoughts of the Blessed Mother could only be known and written down if Luke had been directly in contact with Mary herself at some point during the construction of this gospel, placing the date of the recording of this passage sometime before AD 45. But even so, how can we know that the apostles actually believed what Christ claimed? The simplest and most straightforward explanation goes like this. If the apostles had invented Jesus as a literary figure, if the apostles had faked the resurrection, if the apostles didn't actually believe what Jesus claimed about himself, then why on earth would all 12 of them risk execution or exile in the case of John of Patmos, while leading hundreds and thousands through their lifetimes to the same fate under Roman subjugation? If Peter did not truly believe that Jesus was God, would he have taken his lie to his inverted crucifixion? Would Bartholomew have been flayed open if he had faked the resurrection? If Jesus made up his stories, if James had made up his stories, would he have been beheaded for his falsehoods? Regardless of your or my personal convictions about Jesus' claims as the Son of Man, the Messiah, the Word made flesh, and the most holy name of God, Yahweh, the great I Am, there is no reason to doubt the conviction of those closest to Jesus in life, who went to their deaths proclaiming his divinity. If you've made it this far into the video, thank you. I've provided you only a glimpse into the beauty and truth found within Scripture, but what does it all mean? If nothing else, I hope this video has proven that whatever you believe about the nature of Christ, it is clear and undeniable that Jesus was a real historical figure who believed himself to be the fulfillment of all Jewish prophecy, the Son of Man at the right hand of God in heaven, the physical embodiment of the Word of God that began all things, and that because of this belief, Jesus was crucified by the Roman authorities at the behest of the religious leaders in Jerusalem. And that had the apostles not believed in the resurrection of Jesus, none of them would have given up their lives for that lie. It is entirely unfounded to hold Jesus to be merely a literary figure, like some embodiment of the hero's journey, and it's entirely impossible that the apostles, all of whom had died for his sake, did not believe in his divinity. Now, whenever you encounter a classmate, a colleague at work, an authority figure in your life, know that you can provide solid evidence that no matter what you believe about Jesus as a person, that he did in fact exist and believed in himself. Thank you all so much for watching. If you've enjoyed this video, if you found it informative or educational in any way, consider leaving a like and comment what you gained most from it. If you're interested in more videos like this, make sure to subscribe and turn on your notifications for future releases. This is the first video in what I pray will be a long and fruitful series, taking biblical topics and concepts large and small and forming them into simple, digestible bites with some gameplay in the background, because it's nice to have something on screen while you're learning. Leave a comment if you'd like a certain topic to be covered, as I do read as many comments as I can on these videos, and it's always good to know what my audience wants to see. If you'd like the opportunity for your questions to be read out in a video, I will be posting Q&A videos where I will answer directly the questions you guys have about Christianity. There's nothing off the table, but I cannot necessarily guarantee that every single question will be answered in every single video. Even still, my goal is to make this an open resource of simple, straightforward, and clear answers that accurately represent the beliefs of Christians across time. If you would like to pick up any of the historical texts referenced in today's video, check the description for our Amazon affiliate links for each source. Every purchase using these links costs nothing extra for you, but provides us here at CatechesisCraft with a small percentage to help fund our work. You can also become a supporter on Locals for $10 a month and get access to future articles, blog posts, live streams, and access to a Minecraft server, all of which are coming soon in the biblical sense. But all of that is completely optional. I'm excited to begin this journey with all of you and extremely thankful for the fact that you chose to watch this video. I hope you all have a great rest of your day, whenever you're watching this. God bless, and I'll see you all next time.